Welcome to the Ride On Podcast, episode 2. I'm your co-host, James Gross, and I'm joined by Julia Thane. How you doing, Julia?
Doing great, James. How are you?
I'm feeling fresh. And off of episode 1, like we're veterans now, right? We got this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I heard that you had a raucous city council meeting last night, James. So you might have stayed up a bit late.
That's right. Way past my bedtime. 11:30, hanging out in the city council chambers. I highly advise it as anyone who lives anywhere. It's part of your public duties. Do you go to city council meetings, Julia?
Of course I do. I used to work for the mayor's office. What are you talking about? James, it's like you don't know me.
We can edit that question out. Sorry. For folks at home, just to explain a little bit more about the Ride On podcast, being this is only our second episode. The concept is Julia and I will be taking topics from this week's Micromobility Newsletters that come out on Tuesday and Thursday, and we'll try to discuss 5 of those topics each in detail, where we'll bring a topic and then we'll ask each other, what our thoughts are on that topic. The topics can range from new vehicles to any sort of micromobility policies that are out there, to things like e-bike incentives. That's a really hot topic right now. We'd appreciate it if you give us feedback on the episode. We already got a lot of feedback from episode 1, which we really appreciate, and we'll be giving out a prize around our favorite commenter. So yeah, let's try to keep that up, and we'll continue to learn and hopefully improve this. So yeah, that's a little bit on that. And I don't know, what do you think, Julia? Anything else I should add?
I think we're good to go, James.
Good to go. Okay, just looking for
you.
All right.
Yeah.
So just a couple of things I want to announce before we jump right into the topics are just some things that we got going on at Micromobility Industries. First and foremost, for our Riders' Choice Awards, we now have a page on our website where you can go if you are a finalist or a winner, and you could download your badge across any category that you want. And we actually have an embed code that will work automatically if you'd like to just include this on your website. We have different sizes, and again, this will work for winners and for finalists. You can also put your own logo too. We're adding that feature here shortly. Second thing I wanted to mention was Oliver Bruce, our lovely friend from New Zealand, who is in Southern California during the Riders' Choice Award. All of his podcasts are now live, whether that's from him talking to LeGrand Cruz at Super 73, talking to Benno Benzinger of Benno Bikes, as well as talking to Rivian and their new electric motorcycle, and the amazing work that they're doing in California with the grant that they received from the state. So those are all live. You should go check them out. And I know Oliver loves to hear your feedback. So yeah, thanks so much for listening. And then finally, wanted to mention that comment that won. So big shout out to Sam Lalk, who won our first ever comment award. This will get you a ticket to Micromobility Europe or Micromobility America, your choice. Not sure where you are, Sam. But if you don't mind writing to us at info@micromobility.io, you will receive your free ticket to whichever conference you would like to attend. So yeah,
this is pretty exciting, James. Are we going to be doing awards or free conference passes for every week and every best commentator?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do it.
Yeah. Why not?
So yeah, that's it for housekeeping. Julia, take us away.
All right. Well, James, first up on our topic today is probably the sexiest of micromobility topics, and that is docking stations. You probably saw this in the newsletter, James, but Lyft has rolled out a dockable scooter and a new docking station called, do you want to guess what it's called?
Scooter dock?
Nope. That is not a good guess. That's a really boring guess. Why would it just be called scooter dock? That's like getting a teddy bear and calling it teddy bear, or a dog and calling it dog. No, so James, like, why are you in branding?
It's a long guess again.
All right, so back to the news. The new docking station is called The Pillar, and the is with a capital T. So this is The Pillar. I'm actually pretty excited about this. I mean, to be honest, I'm kind of wondering why it took us this long to get to docking stations for scooters. The whole reason we're having a referendum in Paris as to whether or not there should be e-scooters on Paris's streets and sidewalks is because folks have been complaining about the kind of clutter that e-scooters create. So it seems to me like pretty obvious that we should have had a docking station that had docks for both bikes and scooters. But it's taken this long. I'm sure there's a lot of technological innovation that goes into this, and I think it looks pretty good. What do you think?
Do I think it looks pretty good? Well, I try to withhold commentary on what looks good or not on the sidewalk. I think anything looks better than parked cars, which it seems like no one has a problem with, but everyone has a problem with everything else next to the road. So I'm going to withhold any sort of aesthetic comment other than saying I approve.
Better than parked cars. Okay, low bar, but it's better than parked cars. I mean, one other thing about this, James, and not to get too dorky about this, but Lyft was responding to feedback from cities that these docking stations are just taking up too much real estate, that they're really spread out, that they're taking up, whether it's too many parking spaces or too much of the sidewalk itself. And so this docking station not only has docks for scooters and for bikes, but also is a smaller footprint than their other docking stations.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a
James?
question on docking station. Do you can see it here, I believe, where you have an e-bike option or a pedal bike option. Does Julia always take the e-bike, or does sometimes she take the pedal bike? I'm just curious what you would choose when you get to this docking station.
Great question. I'm always going to take an e-bike if I can. I used to be pedal bike only, and I was like, all right, I'm going to get a little bit of a workout in between things. Those pedal bikes are really heavy. And so it's just helpful to have that e-bike, especially if you're in San Francisco, for example, where Lyft is operating their bike share and scooter share. So yeah, I'm going to go for an e-bike.
Great. Fun fact, Julia, I got hit one time on a regular Lyft bike in the Bay Area.
What? By what?
Yeah, by a car.
James, that's not good. Was this during Micromobility America?
No, I mean, this was just a regular day in Oakland. A van, nice woman. She seemed very nice. She was very concerned about my health afterwards. But I sometimes think, I wonder if I was on an e-bike if I would have been hit, because she clipped my her side view mirror clipped the handlebars. And when you ride a pedal bike versus an e-bike, I find that I'm a little less consistent in terms of like bobbing a little bit with a pedal bike. And I got hit. It was only, it's a matter of inches. But it flipped over the handlebars and everything. It was pretty traumatic.
Are you okay?
Yeah, we could talk about that.
James, I'm not sure if I would call this a fun fact, but it is a fact indeed about your life.
Well, but yeah, I always think about that with the pedal bikes. Those are heavy pedal bikes, and I see a lot of users really swaying. So I would always recommend an e-bike, especially if you don't cycle a lot. So yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. So James, what are you reading?
Yeah, let's talk about my first topic, which I've entitled, Can a car maker, or what you might call an elephant in business parlance, dance? And so one of the really exciting announcements this week was that Rivian is actually, we've heard rumors about it, but Rivian is sort of confirmed via an internal leak from RJ, the CEO, talking that they are in fact producing an electric bike. This is very exciting. This is not something new to the auto industry. We've seen a lot of false starts as it relates to what I'd call elephants trying to build e-bikes and not being very successful. But with Rivian, you have a little bit more of an upstart company who I think has always had a vision for an electric bike, if you read the early kind of founding story of Rivian. So I think this is an amazing idea. I hope they're very serious about it. This comes at the same time that Rivian's been announcing layoffs and things. So, there's a lot of questions in the marketplace, how Rivian will become a profitable company, will become a company that will be able to sustain, the investments that they have and the valuation that they have. So I remain very hopeful. And just for fun, we wanted to show everyone, we made a few Rivian potential mock-ups in Midjourney, the AI tool. And so I want to just kind of show that here so everyone can see what we did. I think we're really excited about this. I think we're really excited about a company the size of Rivian actually building an e-bike, which, this based on Rivian's market cap, they are from a valuation perspective, the largest company really getting serious about an electric bike. So that's also, I think, exciting. But what do you think, Julia?
These look so good. Honestly, I mean, maybe AI should just be doing everything for us, because I'm not sure that we could do much better. But of the four of those, if I were going to choose the profile that I liked, let's see, there's probably only the top right one that's a step through. So I would most likely go with a step through, but that top or bottom right one looks really, really good. And personally, I kind of can't wait for a Rivian e-bike because if I was going to purchase an electric vehicle, which I'm thinking about doing, or leasing an electric vehicle, the Rivian SUV is probably the one I would go for.
When is that out?
Well, you can put yourself on the waiting list right now, but it's going to be about a year before you actually get it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So, James, speaking of two-wheelers, one of the bigger stories from this week, and honestly, just in general, is about two-wheeler sales in India. So there was a strategic consulting company that did an estimate of how the two-wheeler market in India is going to grow. They are estimating that by 2030, 22 million of the sales of two-wheelers in India are going to be electric, which is 80% of their total market. So just to give you a bit of a perspective, US e-bike sales were 1 million in 2022. So we're talking about 22 million e-bikes, or sorry, micromobility two-wheelers sold in India in 2030. And what this chart is showing is basically what the more conservative, what the base case, and what the aggressive sales might be for those two-wheelers in India. One of the things that I found really interesting is that this consulting company not only did these like sort of curves as to how the two-wheeler market will grow, and you're seeing here that the growth is going to be between 60 and 65% from now to 2030. But they also looked at what are some of the things that are going to prevent this from happening. And I'll give the viewers a moment to pause on this as they're listening to this podcast. But it's not surprising what the survey respondents said in terms of issues with adoption. It's two things: charging time and availability of charging infrastructure. So maybe in India we're going to start seeing things like the pillar roll out across cities in India in order to be able to have some charging infrastructure, of course, and some faster charging.
Very fascinating. The study is interesting to me in that you see so many of the studies as it relates to micromobility usage in America being safety as the really oftentimes like the top 2 or 3 or 4 issues ultimately that align with infrastructure. But this is like a different infrastructure. This is a charging infrastructure, which is not really of course associated with safety. Why do you think Americans and Indians have such sort of different responses?
That's so interesting. I didn't really notice that or think about that as I was looking at these reasons. I mean, maybe there's a different baseline understanding of what safety might look like on a road. Have you traveled to India, James?
I haven't.
Okay. My experience is limited. Has been there just one time, but my experience of being in Mumbai and just kind of traveling around southern India is that roads are a bit chaotic, but there's a like a harmony to the chaos in that folks understand when you're navigating people who are on mopeds, when you're navigating minibuses, when you're navigating, they call them autos or tuk-tuks or rickshaws in other places, that you kind of have to be aware of who else is on the road. And so my guess is that, there's just kind of like this baseline understanding of what safety means on roads in India that's slightly different than what safety means or what the perception of safety is on US roads.
Yeah, I agree. Very, very interesting. And again, I'd be fascinated to see how that might change in time as I think about, it's just, I think people demand more from their vehicles and being safe, while being mobile.
Yeah.
Let's stay on this topic actually. So a little bit and talk about David Zipper in Slate this week had an article out about taxing vehicles based on weight, which I think is a very, very interesting topic. Of course, in the world of micromobility, where we basically, we measure things based on weight, but also in a time when, of course, around the world, we are trying to drive electric vehicle adoption. And the one common misunderstanding about electric vehicles is they are a lot heavier. So, an equivalent internal combustion car weighs anywhere from, roughly about 60% of their of what the electrical equivalent is, that now, of course, people are upgrading to and auto manufacturers are making. And so Zipper's article talked about this idea, or proposed the idea of taxing vehicles based on weight. Like, we have plenty of systems where, of course, based on, how much money you make, you get taxed. And so this is a clever idea. And he points out that actually the country leading the charge on this is Norway. Why Norway is interesting is Norway was really the earliest adopter of electric vehicles. 87% of all new vehicles purchased in Norway are electric. In so many ways, as much as like here in the US, we like to think of ourselves as early adopters of mobility, we simply aren't. And so, but what Norway is showing is that they've already sort of crossed the chasm of electric vehicles. But I think what they're saying is we're actually concerned about that adoption, and we're concerned about the vehicle weight size, and we think we need to do something about that. So, of course, Norway is also doing things to shut down automobiles in city centers. But this vehicle tax, I think, is something we really need to take seriously, of course, as we're getting these cars on the road, and we just need to think about the second and third order consequences of driving in large cars. And so I just I think this is a fascinating topic. I also wanted to share. I think you're seeing it on Twitter, for instance, some of the contradictions, of course, happening as it relates to moving to electric vehicles. So this is a very now famous photo of Biden in the Hummer that's coming out. This Hummer weighs the same weight as 3 Honda Civics, so it's almost 10 pounds exactly. The other thing, I mean, Biden has tweeted this photo out a couple of times now from his Twitter account. He most recently did this in late January. This vehicle does not qualify for the EV tax credit. Its MSRP is $110,000. So it's very weird to be pushing this message of electric vehicles that don't qualify for the tax credit. And of course, just knowing the damage they potentially do to the earth, also just a very, very interesting message coming from the Biden administration. I might recommend maybe some new people in communications for Biden if this continues, because I don't think this is the message we want to try to get across. As well. Yeah, sorry. I think I'm pointing this out because I think there's a much more serious impact to this, which is this is a fascinating image that shows the best-selling vehicle in Europe versus the best-selling vehicle in America. So in America, the best-selling vehicle is the Ford F-150. In Europe, I actually don't know what that vehicle is, but roughly that's the size of it. I think you can glaringly see what's different about these things on this page. And again, we need to worry about weight, right? When you look at road fatality in the US versus our peer economies. So this is a chart. The blue line is basically advanced European economies, including things like Canada and Japan. And the red line is America. So Julia, when you and I were born, America was the safest place to be mobile in the world. We lost that lead in the 21st century, and we continue to lose it. And there's a lot of potential reasons for this. A lot of people want to point out cell phones. My counter to that is most people in the world have cell phones now. All these economies that you can see here have cell phones. Like they're not adopting cell phones. The biggest difference, I believe, is vehicle weight and vehicle size. And again, the message that we're pointing out is, I think, let's just keep on getting bigger vehicles, which again does not play well with the United States Department of Transportation lead Pete Buttigieg says we're in a crisis as relates to fatality deaths both in vehicles and for pedestrians. So I think just to round this out, I think vehicle weight and taxing on vehicle weight is a very good idea, progressive idea, and yeah, I'm curious what you think, Julia.
Yeah, I mean, two things come to mind. One is American identity and how it's tied up to the automobile. I think the reason that you're seeing Joe Biden in a Hummer is because Hummers are part of the American identity of having large, almost tank-like vehicles that protect us from whatever else is out there on the street or on the road, for that matter, on the freeway, the highway. My sister actually, when she was a senior in college, wrote her undergraduate thesis around how American identity is tied to Hummers. And she went out and she was part of these like Hummer clubs and did Hummer rides. And it's this whole, community. I don't want to say cult. It's a whole community around just, what the importance of the Hummer is to especially rural, but, kind of semi-rural or suburban lifestyles. But I agree with you. I think it's a dangerous message to send that when we're doing vehicle electrification, we're basically just electrifying the status quo rather than moving to something that is safer, that is more environmentally friendly. The other point that comes to mind is actually a report that Rocky Mountain Institute put out last year called the DMV, an unlikely climate champion. So DMV is the Department of Motor Vehicles. They have not revamped their fee structure in years. And if they did, and we kind of came up with this like graduated fee structure around the availability of transit, around the weight of the vehicle, around what type of vehicle it was, we showed that these differentiated DMV fees could pull 300,000 internal combustion engine vehicles out of the US's most populous cities and increase electric vehicle adoption by 39%. So I think, definitely onto something there in terms of just having differentiated fees for cars and making sure that those are consistent across both electric vehicles and ICE vehicles. So James, just kind of switching gears for a second. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I have kind of a thing for like dystopian bike and cycle highways. There was this a concept in London that was called the Skycycle, and it was supposed to be this like 200-kilometer long, above ground highway for bikes, and it was this beautiful design, just really interesting, but it was going to cost an exorbitant amount of money. And so I wrote up an article about how the Skycycle would never work. Well, we're seeing the Skycycle come back, but this time in Dubai. So the image that I'm showing you here is a proposed concept for a 93-kilometer climate-controlled highway for walking and cycling in Dubai, and they've called it. Do you want to guess?
Oh, man, Road to Freedom.
Close, but not quite. This one is called The Loop. Which is a bit like futuristic and also maybe a bit dystopian sounding, but anyways, I think as good or better branding than the Pillar. So James, what do you think? Would you ride on something like this? Like, do you think it's a good idea to build a 93-kilometer climate controlled highway just for walking and cycling?
Oh, yeah, we couldn't be on more extreme ends of this. I love this. This is not dystopian. This is the future. Arthur C. Clarke, the famous quote from Arthur C. Clarke, right? In the universe, we will never run out of energy or matter. We'll simply run out of brains. I'm an energy maximalist. We have to try these things. We have to push, like we're building. This is someone actually thinking about building something. What an amazing idea. This is so cool. Like, absolutely. We should figure this out. I mean, they clearly in Dubai, you have very different climate challenges, and so climate control seems a little silly to me, living in a place where I can ride all year, and I can put on layers and take off layers, but I don't need an entirely dome system. But if they do, I'm all for it. Yeah, so let's do it. Let's build it. Let's try it.
James, you were channeling Horace there for a second. I was thinking that here's the micromobility poet.
Well, I don't know if Horace is an energy maximalist like I am, but so I don't want to there. But yeah, no, I love this stuff. I think it would be, and I think that's the thing. Like, I don't think this is dystopian at all. I think looking at freeways is dystopian.
To be fair, I am pro walking and cycling, but I also think that we should be incorporating it more into like our urban fabric itself, rather than creating artificial beginnings and ends of loops or highway tracks for walking and cycling.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Okay, this is not dystopian. Actually, that might not be true. I want to talk about the rise of the trike. So we've been profiling a lot of trikes. Trikes, of course, are a three-wheel micro vehicle that ideally add more safety and stability to your rides. This could be for people that have any sort of issues with stability and mobility. This, of course, often plays very well into older audiences and into younger audiences. And so I wanted just to highlight, I thought in the latest newsletter, we covered a new company that I hadn't actually seen before, out of here in Southern California, which again is, I think, really, really cool. And so Julia, how do you think you say this? Is this Xotto or Exoto? If you were
Exoto.
Exoto. Yeah. Well, it seems like they want to really highlight
Exoto. Yeah, great question. Tell us in the comments how to say this.
Yeah, I think Exoto is good though. That's really clever. You went somewhere I didn't go with that. I think that's right. So yeah, this is a super clever bike. It's meant for, they're trying to sort of urban mobility up to 45 miles per hour, has some patents around self-stabling technology, which we've covered a lot of companies like the Nimbus and Danny Kim's company, Lit Motors, who does a lot of self-stabilizing technology. But I think bringing it to this a little bit more of a convenient vehicle like this is a very good idea, where so many of those vehicles are pods that are enclosed. This to me feels much more approachable, open, and something I might really be interested in riding. This, coincides nicely in the e-bike world, where we're seeing the rise of the Trike, with the RAD's announcement and with Lectric's announcement in the last 60 days. So I think we're going to see more Trikes, of course, in the format of bikes, but I also like this idea of Trikes in the format of something a little bit faster, like a moped. So yeah, what do you think, Julia?
I think you kind of can't go wrong when you do a photo shoot on, the beach in Venice. Like I feel like I've seen that photo many times with many different e-bikes or electric motorcycles and e-mopeds, and every time I'm like, that bike, that one's for me, or that Trike, that one is for me. So I, at the very least, applaud what they've done there in terms of some of the marketing materials. I have to say, James, I'm not yet a believer in the Trike. I maybe need to try out a few more of them just to understand like how much better they feel from a stability perspective, or whether they might be a good replacement for my use cases than an e-moped. But I'm interested to see if this company in particular can make Trikes cool, because so far we've seen different types of Trikes, and some of them veer more towards I'm just going to say like a unicycle vibe. They're a little bit weirder, a little bit more niche. And then some of them are more like this one, where it seems like they're actually going for people who would normally ride four-wheelers. And they're going for that sort of use case branding vibe.
Yeah. Okay. So you want a cool Trike? I get it. I think that's right. And you have people in your life though that you'd like, oh, I'd want to. Or do you ever have you ever had a use case where you're like, I want to ride with this person, but I don't feel comfortable having them ride on an e-bike, like a two-wheel vehicle?
Yeah, actually, yeah. And people of different ages too. I mean,
Yeah.
I know some people who just aren't that comfortable on bicycles, like,
Right.
and maybe didn't grow up riding bicycles, and so feel like they need something more stable. So yeah, that's a good point. What about you, James? Are you investing in a Trike to add to your collection?
I think so, for sure. Yeah, I think that's definitely something I like to do. And then even at the moped level, I also think it's an interesting concept, especially if you can. Mopeds are great, but the self-stabilizing technology and just the idea of a third wheel, I think is a very potentially a very good way to get people, going 35, 45 miles per hour and feeling comfortable with it. So
Yeah.
I
This is
want to
kind of a random question, James, but do you let your kids ride e-bikes? How old are your kids? Do they have their own?
6, 4, and 1. No, I do not yet. I think, there's a lot of kids bikes out there. And I actually got them new micro scooters for Christmas, the 6 and 4-year-old, but we did not go electric yet. I think electric, to me in my head is 8 years old. I don't know why. But
Okay.
6-year-old riding, I mean, some of the electric scooters and e-bikes are great. You can speed govern them. They have additional stability. They're very low to the ground. So you could definitely do it. I think in my head, I'm just waiting a little bit longer.
Yeah, that could be a cool category to add to Ride Review and to the Micromobility, or sorry, the Riders' Choice Awards, and even just to some of our conferences and events. It's like, what does micromobility look like for kids?
No, you like totally read our mind. We're doing a couple guides right now for kids e-bikes and e-bikes for seniors. And so yeah, we're trying to definitely cover an age spectrum a little differently than we have in the past. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
Great. Okay. Well, James, taking us in a different direction, got to go back to one of our favorite topics,
Yeah.
e-bike rebates. So Denver's last round of 860 rebates were snatched up in 20 minutes. I mean, wow, like just the fact that they've been able to get such widespread adoption of those rebates is really impressive. Just a couple of numbers that came out in one of the recent articles around the success of the Denver e-bike rebate program. They spent $4 million, reduced vehicle miles traveled by about 100,000 miles. So just to give you a per mile cost, that's about $40 per mile driven in terms of how much they spent versus how much they reduced VMT. But of course, there have been so many more benefits of this. 3.4, that's the average number of vehicle trips that the Denver believes their voucher redeemers have replaced each week with e-bike. people are riding 26 miles on their e-bike, which is also nuts to me. Like, I think that's just fantastic. And of course, Denver has decided to re-up this rebate program for next year. One of the things that they're going to keep in mind as they're re-upping this rebate program, and if you check out the short interview that I did with Grace Rink, she talks a little bit about this. But last year, there were 46% of their rebates that were unredeemed. So this year, Denver's going to have to look at how do we make sure people are not just claiming those rebates, they're using those rebates. And what are some of the things that we can do to work with the bike stores, to work with people, to make sure that those are claimed. And James, I know you've been following this, but in California, the California Air Resources Board is about to go live with a $13 million program where they're giving $1,000 e-bike rebates to income qualified households. So James, what do you think? Is there like a sweet spot for e-bike and e-cargo bike rebates? What do you think is going to be the most successful program in terms of getting people not only to sign up for those rebates, but also to use them?
Yeah, well, one, it's so cool. It's so cool the interview you did, Julia. I really enjoyed it. You can see it on YouTube, on our channel. Hats off to Denver for really kind of being a pioneer here. I think in a lot of ways in America. I know there's of course really good incentive programs in other countries around the world. I believe that this is going to really take off, and I think it's going to get really competitive. Right? It was very clear from the Inflation Reduction Act that we wouldn't have any federal incentives. You can kind of look at the timeline where cities and counties and states really took over and said, okay, we've got to take this on, which is great. I think it's creating a lot of different options and and we're going to be able to see what works and what doesn't work. I'm very concerned about 46% unredeemed. I'm very concerned about how some of these programs are run. I feel like, a little bit like a Ticketmaster thing, almost like, what are we doing here? Like,
I know.
a way to do this. It's in many ways, I worry about regulatory capture around some of the rules that we're seeing. I think Denver learned a little bit. Originally Denver had some of their rules that were like that for what vehicles you could buy. That I know there was a little bit of a thing going around where like the original rules, based on the restrictions, made it so that you could only buy if it was a cargo bike, it had to be like at least a $6,000 cargo bike based on warranty and stuff. So, again, it's not really accomplishing, I think, what they're trying to do. So, but we're going to learn from it. It's going to get so much better. And I think the only thing I would ask is we need way more money because the demand is really there. And so we need to put more money behind these programs. But I remain super optimistic. I think that's going to come, and I think it's great. So it's cool that you or Julia, I credit you a lot for getting Grace on, and I know you guys have talked a couple times. So kudos to Denver, and game on for all the other cities. Let's go.
Totally.
Okay, I wanted to kind of keep it in the world of policy, and talk about the idea that e-bikes are increasingly showing signs that they're deflationary, right? I know we've been living through a lot of inflationary moments here, with COVID and then post-COVID, but it's really cool. I mentioned the trikes before. So, for instance, on the electric trike game, it's really hard to get an electric trike for less than a bike that is for less than $3,000 in the US. And then Rad came out with one at $2,500, and then Electric's trike that they just came out with is $1,500. Which is with not with mechanical brakes, with hydraulic brakes, which is an incredible price. And I think it just really speaks to this idea. And we had Levi Conblow, challenging sort of the entrepreneurs in the e-bike space at Micromobility World, saying, hey, we can get these prices down. That is awesome, right? And that literally flies in the wind to what we're seeing in the world of automobiles, like cars, is a big thing last week. So the federal electric car incentive program raised their bottom price from top price from 55 to 80. I think it was covered in the newsletter. And the same day that happened, Tesla literally raised their prices, basically knowing that now they could raise their price in order to get people to actually qualify at that higher level, which is, again, just a very, very bad sign. And so I just think it's so great to see that e-bikes are sort of following the curve that you'd want technology to follow, which is technology should be deflationary, and it looks like it is. And again, not happening on the at the car level. And one graph I just wanted to share really quickly, of course, is the price. This is an amazing chart because this affects basically everyone. This is the average used car financed price on a monthly basis, your monthly payment. This is not a new car. This is a used car. Is now spiking. Of course, what's happening, this is two confounding problems. One, of course, is the lack of potential supply, but it's also the rising interest rates. So this is a bit of a boiling frog problem where this will get worse and worse. And so you have the average used car price almost $550 a month. That's for a used car. New car is over 700 now, well over 700. A lot of Americans cannot afford this. And so like, what are we doing here? And again, why aren't cars following a deflationary pattern? That's what all technology should follow, deflationary patterns like we're seeing with e-bikes. So again, in my opinion, huge win for e-bikes. And in my opinion, we need to do something about cars, and we probably should stop incentivizing and putting money behind buying them until we can figure out how to drive out some of this inflation.
Yeah, I mean, one question I have for you, James, is how much of this do you think is artificial? Like, is this artificial inflation and artificial deflation?
Well, there was the Tesla story. The other story was, once the federal incentive was passed, literally that week as well, the Ford raised their Lightning prices by $7,500. And literally the correct amount that you could get in the rebate. To me is very artificial. That's not the market.
Yeah.
And again, it's a funny place to put money because there's a lot of demand for electric vehicles. People are going to naturally upgrade. They're superior. When we give people money though to do it, it's a very easy way to artificially raise your prices. And so yeah, I think we've got to demand way more of the auto industry to not see that chart cannot be sustained. So
yeah. And I know, you had a great conversation with the founder, the CEO of Electric, and I honestly would posit the same is true about micromobility, that there might be some artificial deflation, that companies like Electric are trying to push down their prices so they get wider adoption, especially for new vehicles like Trikes. They're trying to test out whether or not this sort of vehicle can be accepted by a wider market. And of course, companies like Electric also have a slightly different customer base than you see for a lot of the other Trikes and e-bikes in the market. They go for more of a rural or suburban type customer, whereas with many of the other e-bike and e-trike companies, they're actually going for a more urban consumer at different age levels, but a more urban consumer. So I think I would agree with you that there's probably some false inflation in the car market, whether it's new or used, electric or not electric. But there's also probably some false deflation right now in the micromobility market. And to be quite honest, I'm fine with that. Like, I think that the prices need to drop so that we get some more butts in seats, as we like to say here. So James, let me go into my last story and then we'll round out with you. This one was an op-ed by Carol M. Browner and Andrew Savage. And I pulled out a quote that I liked here, partially just because I like puns, but also because I thought that this was a good thing to debate. So the quote is, "We should reframe the conversation about the future of urban mobility from being car-centric to being carbon-centric." And the point of this article was really, this op-ed was to make the case for micromobility even over electric vehicles. They cited a recent Oxford study that said that micromobility is 10 times more important than widespread EV adoption for replacing cars and reducing carbon. And I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts? Do you think this reframing from car-centric to carbon-centric is a helpful way of thinking about micromobility, or no?
I don't, if I'm being honest. I know that's hard to hear, but no, I don't think this works. I don't ride my vehicles, and I don't think a lot of consumers ride vehicles thinking about their carbon centricity. I think you do it because it's fun, it's affordable, it's a superior option, it's 100x better than the other option. So I respect, Carol and Andrew's opinion here. I mean, it's very pro micromobility, which I love. I just find this conversation falls on deaf ears outside of policy meetings and just doesn't touch the human behind the wheel.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you here, James. Actually, I don't think it's helpful either to talk about micromobility as being first and foremost a carbon-centric solution. especially because as we're talking about, micromobility options across levels of income, across types of communities, I think it's much more important to focus on that human-centered experience, to think about how this improves somebody's access to mobility, how it improves the distance that they can go, how it improves potentially their safety or their ability to get to more jobs. So agree with you here that reducing carbon is I don't want to say a secondary benefit. It's definitely a primary benefit, but it's not the one that we should focus on in terms of making the case for micromobility. James, take us home.
Surprised we agree on that. That's cool. Okay, yeah, I'll take us home. So last one, from the comments, actually, people asked if we could talk a little bit about subscription businesses and highlight them. And so, happy to do that when we can. So in the newest, actually, Micromobility Newsletter, we had a really kind of clever story on a company called Moves out of Sweden, who is launching 2 new subscription bikes. One is called the Ergo and one is called the Nord. And just to show you what those look like here, Julia, see if you're in the market for one of these. I'll do that. And so, yeah, these images unfortunately don't do it justice. You really should go to YouTube and watch the Moves e-bike videos. They're very clever, very fun. They talk about the bike having the 6th sense. So they're about a minute long, and I just applaud the creativity. It's a very different approach to selling a vehicle, in my opinion. But yeah, these are both available. They offer everything from a butler service to at-home delivery. I think what's so cool about subscription there is like a sort of nice example of this in the auto market with leasing. That makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of consumers do like this model of subscription. And then, of course, what we've talked a lot about, Julia, I know this is near and dear to your heart, is the idea of servicing. And I think when you move to a subscription model, servicing can sit much more front and center with the customer and the relationship that they have, the ongoing relationship they have with the vehicle manufacturer and the servicing component of it. So yeah, I'd be curious what your thoughts are, Julia, on subscription in general and what you think of these rides.
I mean, first thing comes to mind is that image on the top right, that orange outfit looks like what our dear Oliver was wearing for the Rider's Choice Awards. And also maybe our new uniforms for the show. Like, James, I look better in purple, so I can wear purple and you can wear orange. What do you think?
Game on.
I mean, personally, I'm pro subscription. I think it's a great way of testing out a new ride. I think it's a really good way of appealing to a consumer who's not always in the same place. I mean, we talked about digital nomads. Of course, it's good for a digital nomad, but it's also good for somebody who's living in a multi-unit dwelling or apartment and who might not know if they have somewhere long-term to store their bike, might be moving around a bunch, and so might need something that's a bit more flexible. And for that matter, lower barrier to entry in terms of cost and just being able to get something for a lower cost. Going back to that servicing point, James, another reason I like subscriptions is because of the servicing factor. I mean, the micromobility industry writ large, but e-bikes in particular, really need to figure out how you train folks to be better at maintenance and to be able to do repairs and to get access to some of those parts that are needed for e-bikes and micromobility options versus for conventional bikes or other non-electric options. And so I don't know that I see subscription being the biggest market or the market that's most sustaining. But I do think it's a really good bridging mechanism for right now as we're starting to get people educated about the different micromobility options, as we're starting to build out that workforce who knows how to take care of micromobility options. And as we're kind of bridging this gap between the direct to consumer model where you're buying something online and then getting it delivered to your house versus this in-person retail option where you're able to both buy something and then get it serviced in person.
Oh yeah, it's great. I love it. I love the pitch. Yeah. Hearing you talk, you have had an impact on me there where I always kind of was like a DTC maximalist in a way. I always thought like, oh, it's just so efficient and, straight to the door, such a good startup approach to how you can build your business and a growth strategy. But, talking to you and then of course, just seeing so much of the data now, it's pretty clear that this is a very viable option. I'm excited for the suites to potentially crack it, right? We have the moves, we have quite a few companies out of Europe, like Dance with a subscription model. And then of course, our friends Vassala, who won the Riders' Choice Award for best subscription, is out of Sweden as well. The pretty tech-centric companies or tech-centric cultures that also, I think, understand service very well and design and things like that. So I'd love to see them crack it. I don't think anyone's cracked it here in the US at all. But yeah, I think it's going to work. And it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and maybe next week, James, we could dig into that a bit more and talk a little bit about the direct-to-consumer model and how companies like Cowboy are also figuring out how to build out local ecosystems of both like folks who are delivering the bikes and then folks who are taking care of the bikes in order to support more of that DTC.
Yeah, let's do it. And you've got a Cowboy, right? We gotta hear how you're doing on that thing.
Yeah, I'm happy to share.
Cool, awesome. Well, Julia, that's it for this week, I think. You got anything else to add?
Nope, that's it. Leave comments in the comment box. I don't know what you call it. Leave comments, feedback. Leave feedback and comments if you want on how this podcast is going and topics you'd like us to talk about. And James, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Right on.
Right on.